Hello.
Thank you for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
Can you tell the people at home a little bit about yourself?
My name is Mamoudou N'Diaye. I used to be a science teacher. Before that, I had a degree in neuroscience, which I threw it all away to leave for a world of comedy, DJing, and disappointing my parents. But yeah, and I specifically tie my comedy to social justice issues, specifically mental health and immigrant communities, talking about recentering blackness into narratives and climate change from time to time because it affects all of us. So I
It
want to
sure
make sure
does.
that I'm talking about that as well.
Today we're talking about masculinity,
Yeah.
and I'm curious what kind of masculine norms you were brought up with.
I feel like my dad was a pretty good example of it, in the sense that he was always like willing to listen and like fix mistakes. I mean, I think we are in this like apology climate, and I think that my dad seeing him like I was wrong about this and apologize, it had a big effect on me. And
Like you saw that growing up.
yeah, so like growing up, but I was raised like in kind of a Muslim in a Muslim household and a little bit of an African household, a little bit of being raised by the streets of Ohio. So like it's just like a lot of different ideas to grapple with.
And specifically being raised Muslim in a Muslim African Ohioan household.
Yeah.
What do you think the different definitions of masculinity that you were from all those different communities?
It's very different in all those spaces, and I think having the experience of living here and also living in Mauritania for a little bit of time, it's like going there and seeing what like a country that is mostly Muslim and seeing like the very stark division of like this is what men do, this is what women do, and then coming here and seeing that very similar thing, but it being tied to a different sort of religious thing and a different type of patriarchy has always been interesting. I think that looking at Ohio, it's the Midwest has this very specific sort of this is like what being a man is, and it's pretty homophobic. I'd say in some spaces a little bit anti-Semitic, but I think that adding that on top of this sort of pretty religiously imposed patriarchy on people, especially going back home and seeing like my aunts and my uncles like in two different spaces, even though they clearly love each other and they're all part of this family, I still wanted to spend time with my my female cousins and talk to them about what's going on in their life, because like they're doing things like I gotta go to school, I gotta learn all these different languages, I gotta do all these subjects, and then come home and chop some carrots for dinner. If I don't do that right, then I'm in trouble, and they have to be asked to perform at a different level of excellence than their male counterparts. And not saying that y'all ain't doing your thing, male counterparts, but
yeah, I think it's really interesting that in talking about masculinity, you talked about like the treatment of women, right? And I know I told you to watch this documentary last night, so it's okay if you haven't.
And you know what? I haven't.
But everyone should watch this documentary, The Mask You Live In. It's such a great documentary about masculinity.
I'm excited.
And in it, they talk about how we teach boys that you are a man because of three things, right? Like sexual conquest, athletic ability, and money. And then we also teach boys that the worst thing that you can be is a girl. Right.
Yeah.
And so no wonder when we breed that, like, no wonder dehumanizing women comes as part of that, right? Because it's like, oh, that's something inherently I'm not supposed to be.
Yeah.
So
if by that definition, I'm doing poorly. I'm broke, a torn ACL, and I'm asexual. So it's like I'm not doing great on the masculinity spectrum that documentary sets up.
But that's compelling, right?
Yeah.
Like. Well, speaking of asexuality, like, if we could dive into that for a bit.
We can dip our toe a little bit into it.
Let's dip our toe.
Yeah.
I know you're navigating your journey with that, but, like, that is something, like, sexuality is something that, like, it's more thrust upon men to be sexual than women, I think. I mean, women are supposed to, like, do a dance or whatever, but sometimes not, you know. But would love to hear like how did you start kind of understanding that that you were asexual?
I think it's one of those things where I personally didn't feel I subscribed or was meeting up to like this sort of like sexual drive that a lot of people around me were having. And I went through everything. I was like, oh, maybe I just have low T cells. No, maybe it's just low libido. Maybe I'm just depressed. I am depressed, but it wasn't that. But it's like, it wasn't all of those different things. And I was like, even like going back through like, prior relationships and going into like high school, I was just like, some of these relationships that I was like really wanting to get in was just because everyone else was doing this. And I felt like I needed to do that to conform, especially as somebody who was already so, othered by being, a triple threat of African, Muslim, and, a big old nerd. I was like, oh, I just need to be in a relationship. That'll fix everything. I'll become a white boy like that. And of course it didn't, still black. But like, I had to like really, go back and think about things, and I was like reading books about it. I went to some meetups, I met some other people, and I researched about it. I was like, oh, this sounds like me. And like, I don't like talking about like this sort of feelings in this sort of way, but I had this feeling once. I was like, oh, I might be asexual. That was like my mind was like, click, that makes sense. That everything in my life made sense. And it's something that, being black and Muslim and African, I've always been in opposition to whiteness in the spaces that I especially was raised in, even like science, and even being in New York in the comedy scene, been navigating it in that way. This is one thing that I'm kind of trying to figure out on my own and quietly. Hi, YouTube. But like, I don't really take up space in queer spaces with it, because one of my personal ethos is that I want to create more space than I take up. And I feel like just stepping into spaces and being like, I'm going to be authority about this is not true, because I'm still learning a lot about that. And through that learning, that I need to learn a lot about myself that I kind of either suppress or just move past.
So you mentioned that you are making it your mission to create more space than you take up. Yeah. I love that. How are you doing that?
So first thing, I'm working on a TV show right now. We're trying to get it sold up, but it's called Bias for Us. It's specifically a show that centers blackness. It's like a channel surfing experience through a black TV universe. I try my very best to consistently be hiring black women for everything that I do. I think people are like, well, we can't hire these people because this and no, it's easy. Just be like, click, you're hired. Like, it's like, and the thing is, how many people who are white have learned on the job? Like, come on, dog. Like, and if you need that experience, we'll get you that experience. And I think it's the same thing once you graduate college and they're like, hey, yo, like, you need 6 years of this to get into this job. You're like, bro, I was in college for 4 years. So how am I going to get that? And I've been trying to open up spaces for men to talk about their own, issues. I think that we talked about this briefly. I think there's a culture of disposability, of just like throwing away people whenever they fuck up, and I don't believe in that. I think it's because I used to be a teacher. Like, if I threw away every kid who messed up in my class, I would not be a teacher, So I know that we're grown adults with clearly like ingrained things that we need to unlearn. I think that it's just the truth of the matter is we've been intentionally miseducated, not just on our own racial history, but also our gender history, our sexual histories. And I think that understanding that about people allows me to give them the space to grow and change, and it's giving me the space to grow and change, because I used to be very much like, if I mess up, it's over for me. But now I'm just like, it's okay. You can mess up and you can bounce back from this and you can learn. But it's about what you do and not what you say. It's rather than get on Twitter and tweet about it, just be about it. And I'm trying my best every single day. And I think that knowing if you're the right person to call someone out is 9/10 of the battle. Sometimes I'm like, you know what, maybe I shouldn't weigh in on this. I think that learning to shut up is sometimes part of it, but also standing up when you know that this is a learning moment and trying to help each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
That was super interesting.
Thank you.
Yay.
Appreciate it.
Yay.
Yay.
Thank you.